Okay, seems like I'm live now, and I haven't done a live video in this setting before. I've done other ones, so um, I'll give it a few minutes here for people to show up. That picture looks nice, and I'm going to be talking about some stuff, and some of them have, and I'll be talking about recent predictions that I've made, especially involving not just President Trump, but of course how his um, influences the world in some extent. I'm going to try to keep a lot of my personal disdain somewhat muted and just talk about the events because the events are shown. Also, I made some general predictions about like cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and all that. I'm going to be talking about that a little bit, just kind of revisiting some of that, and also about a few other things that are, especially what's upcoming, and those where we find ourselves now with the with Mars Saturn conjunction, the upcoming Pisces cycle. One of the things I wish was available in this kind of hangout is for me to share my screen, and I will. I can't really do that at this point because there's no means to share the screen that I see. Otherwise, I would be doing that. Toggle timestamps, pop out chat participants. Let me see. There's no way for me to share the screen, so I won't be able to do that. Already, people want to ask questions and all. At the moment, I'm not. If you have questions, maybe we'll get to some questions at some point. But I'm kind of just going to do what I'm going to do here at this point. Let me take a little drink here. And that'll be that. So one of the things that I wanted to make sure, I don't know how many people here are actually subscribers to my site, to this YouTube channel, but I just started something and I just posted it for people who, if you're not a subscriber to the channel, you can go and click that link I just put and get literally like 40 hours of courses that it was actually my first certification course, and you can get it just subscribing to the YouTube channel. And I'm doing that because I want to get a lot of people, subscribing, and I'm going to be doing more of these kind of live things as well, because I really am dedicated to putting good quality, accurate Vedic astrology knowledge out there. And there's a lot of astrologers these days online, and many, many, if not most, if not all, are doing excellent stuff. But obviously, I see where there's a lot of things that are a little suspect, frankly. And so, I really want to be doing a lot of sort of traditional teaching, staying updated with what's happening currently, and being able to do these things live and getting more people subscribing to the channel. There's some fantastic things also that I'm going to be announcing. I thought I would be announcing them already, but there's been some delays, especially from my recent trip to India. People that live in India and who have a hard time getting that book, and also the other book. I've actually partnered with a very well-known school in India who are going to be publishing my books, so people can get them in India and in Asia and all. But it's not a lot of great things coming, and I'm you know, so I'm just trying to raise the stature and the subscriber base of the channel. So go ahead and subscribe and let people know about that. So we're here. It's about 9 a.m. now, Pacific time. Excuse me, in the U.S. About noon Eastern time. And so I want to talk about the current astrology and the current conjunction of Mars and Saturn, especially, and what this can mean to us. Because since Mars moved into Sagittarius about a week ago, we've seen a lot of sudden and shocking changes in the world. And, because a lot of our world now revolves around, we have a lot, like the US president is definitely a big change agent, and he's been changing so many things. It's destabilized a lot of what people around the world see or think or see as potential. I'll be talking about that and some of those shifts. But since last week, we've seen this impromptu, perhaps arranged meeting with the North Korean leader. We've seen, like with him, a lot of changes and firings and kind of shocking, potential instabilities and things like that. And it really portends a cycle of uncertainty, instability. When Mars and Saturn are joined, it shows this sort of potential chaos and upheaval. Last time Saturn and Mars were joined was in 2016 for much of the year. And 2016 was the time when we had the US election and Trump became the nominee. And then shortly after the Mars-Saturn conjunction, he was elected president. But it showed this whole destruction of sort of the status quo of the way it was and this real uncertainty. Now, that was in Scorpio, but we have it now in Sagittarius. And especially for the next few weeks, or I should say the next month or so, as Mars continues to go through Sagittarius, actually, let me give the exact date. Oh yeah, I already know this. It's going to be until early May, until like May the 2nd. Very, it's going to be a time where we're seeing a lot of the structures and the things that we have thought were there to support us, again, get kind of smashed and destroyed and transformed in ways that we're not sure of. Now, that might sound like a general statement, but you want to understand that the sign is very important, and also the fact that Saturn has been here for a while now, off and on since last year. I said at the time, and I've since said many times for those who follow me, that Saturn in Sagittarius was a shift from Saturn in Scorpio, which is where we were trying to manage and control our fears. Saturn is about structure and control and boundaries. When Saturn went through Scorpio for that 2.5 years, Saturn tries to control and structure and commit to something. In Scorpio, it was trying to manage our imagined fears, trying to control the things that we were afraid of, trying to control the paranoid possibilities and all of that kind of stuff. This is why during that time, and particularly in 2016, we saw this whole kind of rise of fake news and conspiracy theories going crazy and all kinds of covert, suspicious things that were trying to tweak us and make us paranoid, which is the simplest way to say it. When Saturn moves into Sagittarius, which it did at the beginning of last year and then went back into Sagittarius in, I believe it was October, we're now focused and we're more committed to what inspires us rather than what we fear. Committed and trying to structure and contain and control and focus what we're inspired by, which is Sagittarius, rather than what we fear. So this is the evolution and the natural growth of Scorpio to Sagittarius. Scorpio is where we're sort of faced with our imagined fears. But based on those imagined fears and those things we can't control, we develop a belief system. We wind up believing something and finding something to inspire us, which is Sagittarius. And so, again, we're trying to focus and make a commitment to that thing now. Now, Mars comes and wants to blow that up and say, oh, so you think this is what inspires you? This is what you're focused on? This is what you're committed to, Mr. Saturn in Sagittarius? Well, how about I come and throw a bomb and blow it up? Let's see how focused you are now. Let's see how focused and committed you can be now that we've blown everything up. Now that we've taken that structure and that thing you were trying to contain and control, which was Saturn and Sagittarius. And again, it started last year. It started actually right after the election of Trump, literally like a week or so, not after the election, but after he was sworn in. Here in the US, for those of you who don't live here, it was actually it was a lot of fear and stress, but it was also a lot of rallies and a lot of people saying, okay, now we're really focused on what inspires us. Now that we have this person in the White House, we need to really be focused. We need to really concentrate on this higher purpose, which is Saturn and Sagittarius. And it kept going for months. And we really slid back into the paranoia again in the summer, which is when Saturn went back into Scorpio, right? And actually, Saturn going into Sagittarius coincided with all of the Me Too movement in the US and all of the empowerment again. This is how these things coincide. So we think that we're focused on these things and we're all being empowered again, and then Mars goes into Sagittarius, joining Saturn and saying, okay, now we're going to introduce this total potential explosive uncertainty. Try to manage that. Now, Mars is really powerful in Sagittarius. Saturn is actually quite uncertain and unstable, because again, Saturn is trying to manage and control this kind of like fiery inspiration. So Mars there is actually really aligned with higher purpose. So when Mars is in fire signs, it's very much aligned with our principles and what inspires us. So on a personal level, and in fact, you even see it in all the political realm and in all of the world around us. Let's use Trump as an example. He's fired up now. He's fired up and inspired. Okay, in fact, he's literally firing people. I'm firing the Secretary of State, I'm firing this one, I'm making these big changes. He's like going, okay, I'm back on track. He's actually a Leo, so Mars is really powerful for him. So you may be feeling this in your life where you're feeling reinvigorated, re-inspired, because Mars in Sagittarius is very like fired up and courageous toward what inspires us. Again, Mars is our courage. And so you've probably seen this also for the last week or so. You feel a kind of renewed sense of courage and focus. But you're also like, okay, I'm renewed focus and courage, but what about these structures in the world and in my life that I'm trying to commit to, that I'm trying to organize? What's going on with that? How is that going to play out? So these are some of the things we're dealing with right now with Mars, Saturn. And again, one of the things that we can really see is how this played out is how there's this setup, especially with this potential meeting with the North Korean leader. Again, it was very out of the blue, very impulsive. You see Mars gives his results very suddenly and quickly, like when he moves into a new sign. Again, this is one of the things that also, again, because I've been tracking this for about 15 years, especially with transits like this. I've been tracking these transits, sidereal transits. I'm going to be very clear here. This is a clear sidereal zodiac statement, because Vedic astrology uses sidereal zodiac, always has nothing ambiguous about it. Every text sidereal, nakshatras and rashis aligned, period, end of story. And you can see when a planet goes into a new Rashi, especially Mars, gives his results really quickly. Mars goes into a new sign and bam, you see something shift. So this is one of the qualities of planets. Some of them give their results all the way through the sign. Some of them give them very quickly when they enter the sign. Some of them give the results around the end of the sign, etc. But Mars is very much about when he goes into a new sign, you see something suddenly happen. So this is why, especially we're seeing in the news, all of a sudden, a lot of things changing really quickly. You might probably see this in your life as well. Suddenly there's a lot of things going on because Mars has moved into Sagittarius and they're aligning you, trying to align you with higher purpose, higher wisdom, and sort of, gifting you with the possibility of connecting and bringing together this force of courage, inspiration, with commitment and focus, which is Saturn. So when Mars and Saturn come together, there's enormous, there's enormous benefit because we bring together these two areas of life that are oriented towards fixing problems, solving problems, and fixing things that aren't working. And this is also what's called tamasic. So this tamasic energy, again, it's often said that it's bad that things are tamasic. It's really not bad. It shows where we are able to face difficulty. So when Mars and Saturn come together, we're able to face difficulty head on. It's not that just that we're able to, we must. So you want to understand, this is the way astrology works. This is the way karma works. It's one thing to say, like, for instance, if someone has Mars and Saturn joined in their natal chart, they're going to have difficulty in that area. What we're doing, we turn things into judgments. That's not what it is. Difficulty is not bad. Understand the difference. This is why, in order to do astrology well, you need discrimination. You can't just be, you have to understand concepts and language and what it means. Nothing is really bad. The universe is benevolent. Difficulty is probably the only way you learn anything most of the time. Most of the time you learn something because you've had to face some difficulty. Because when there isn't difficulty, you just, get stupid, fall asleep, and enjoy it. And it's difficulty that often makes you learn something and grow. Unfortunately, sometimes that's the only way we learn something. And astrology shows us that we don't have to wait until something becomes difficult before we learn. We can also learn things without difficulty. But you would know that when Mars and Saturn come together, like they did in 2016 in Scorpio, like they're doing now, we are going to face difficulty. It doesn't mean it's going to be bad. It means let's get ready for the difficulty, right? And the way we persevere through difficulty is in two ways. One of them is Saturn, which is perseverance, literally, and the other is courage, which is Mars. This is how we do it anyway. But when the two come together, we have to do it, right? So this is a collective cycle right now because the whole world is dealing with Saturn-Mars conjunction. So this is where you see a lot of potential for war, volatility, guns. This is dangerous, man, dangerous. Until early May, especially when Saturn and Mars get closer. Where am I at here? Oh yeah. When Saturn and Mars get really close, what is this? March 28th, like the end of March to early April. Let me just give a couple situations that are possible, certain scenarios. Like, for example, here's the danger of Trump. I don't care if you like him or not, it doesn't matter. This is just a statement of fact. When someone is as inexperienced as he is and he doesn't understand diplomacy and international relations, you don't accept an invitation with the leader of another country, because if that fails, then you don't have any bargaining left. You know, the North Koreans have been trying to get a meeting with the president of the United States forever. They never agreed because they realize it's a diplomatic coup. It's a diplomatic win for North Korea. Now, Trump has gotten a lot of favor. You know, I've seen a lot of even commentators and people who don't like him have said, well, maybe it'll work because we're not really sure what we could do. And maybe it could. I'm not saying that that it's even a mistake. Maybe it might work. I hope it does. I think the world hopes it does. The world hopes that this works out. But what's dangerous is it's hard to even understand if Trump, it's hard to even know if Trump understands the potential danger. Because let's say, for example, that, you know, little rocket man decides to say, you know what? No, I'm not going to have the meeting now. I've changed my mind. And he, like, let's say, totally snubs Trump on the world stage. Thin-skinned Donald Trump, who's already, it's been reported many times, has said, why don't we just start bombing them? And he's got people around him who, in some way, they have war plans to go and just do it, which would result in the death of probably millions of people. Now, I'm not saying he's, you know, that he's an inch away from doing it, but what happens if this potential, like now that you make this big announcement, let's say he gets snubbed, then what happens? Again, you're backed into a corner, and this is what you never want to do in any setting, but certainly where there's this much at stake. This is not how diplomacy works. And again, the thing is, what happens with Trump is that he doesn't understand. His Secretary of State didn't know. There's no plan. Nobody around him knew. He just suddenly announced it without any preconditions. Again, he also didn't get anything in exchange. Usually, if you're going to give away such a high stakes meeting, the president of the United States meeting with him, you do something, you bargain something like release the hostage, you know, because North Korea is holding US prisoners. He didn't even do that. He didn't get anything. He did it because he wants to say that he's the one who did it. And people around him have said this because no other president has been able to do it. That's not what happened. It's not that they weren't able to do it. They didn't do it because they knew it was not a smart thing to do. Because again, what happens, let's say it all plays out and they have the meeting, and then in the end, they walk away and there's no agreement. Where do you go from there? Both leaders have already met and they're at a stalemate. At that point, it's almost like, well, there's nothing left to do but go to war. So again, I'm just saying this is how Saturn and Mars now in Sagittarius can push things to where now it might just blow everything up. This is how Saturn and Mars, when they come together, there's this extreme. Saturn is trying to be strategic and try to control things and go, okay, we need to try to work something out. And Mars comes in and goes, bam. And so, again, I just use that as an example because this is the complexities. And you see, because it's Mars and Saturn in Sagittarius, which is fiery, and Mars feels powerful there. Again, Mars feels powerful. It doesn't mean it's doing good things. Again, get out of judgment. Just because something is powerful somewhere doesn't mean it's good. It can be powerful to go in there, blow something up, and then regret it. So in our life, we have these real potentials now. And look in your life. What are you trying to manage and control, and how does Saturn come in, or how does Mars coming in shift that? Now, one of the things that I talked about, you know, right now we're very much, I put a little link. A while ago, I did quite a few videos about Shiva and Shakti energy. I'm actually teaching a course on Kashmir Shaivism and Vedic astrology and all of these spiritual principles because they're so important right now in this world. And you want to understand that this section of the zodiac, especially where you have Mula Nakshatra opposite Ardra Nakshatra, is very much the Shiva Shakti axis. Because Mula Nakshatra is ruled by the goddess Niriti, which became Kali in the later Indian myth. You have this goddess Kali down in Mula Nakshatra, and then opposite that, Ardra is actually the section of sky related to Lord Rudra or Lord Shiva. Hang on for a second. And you see how Shiva and Kali are depicted this way, with Shiva doing the dance, the wild ecstatic dance I have it backwards. Kali doing the wild ecstatic dance with Shiva laying at her feet. Shiva like the support and the substratum of consciousness, and Shakti or Devi or the feminine Kali doing the ecstatic wild dance. And that whole act of destruction, creation, is this section of the zodiac. And this section of the zodiac, again, it's not just a stereotype, it's not just an archetype. Vedic astrology is not archetypal, it's not like some archetype. It's actually quite literal. This section of the sky is literally where the plane of the galaxy runs. The galactic plane, when you look back into the center of our galaxy, there's the plane of the galaxy, and it runs along Mula and Ardra, about 6 degrees of Mula, 0 Ardra. That's literally where the plane of the galaxy runs. And this is where the power and the destructive power of our solar system runs. So it's not just a symbol. In fact, if it wasn't for the heliosphere of the sun, the sun doesn't just shine at the center. It has an extension. Its magnetic field, what's called the heliosphere, extends beyond our solar system, or it extends through the solar system out past like the Kuiper belt, protecting us from the radiation from the center of the galaxy. This is why the sun has this protective quality, because that section of the sky where Shiva Shakti is, Mula and Ardra, is destructive. If it wasn't for the protective heliosphere of the sun, we would be destroyed with gamma and X-rays and all of that. So I'm saying this because this is where we have Mars, and Saturn just moved out of Mula. Saturn is now in Purvashada. But this section of sky with Mars in Mula Nakshatra is it's not just dangerous, it's very transformative. So the way you can understand this in your life is this Shiva Shakti Kundalini power. This is the power of the Kundalini, especially when this is why Mars is at its most powerful here, because after he goes through Sagittarius, he goes into Capricorn where he's exalted for 6 months. Now, Capricorn is really the power of Mars to bust through the Kundalini, because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and that's the Muladhara chakra. That's the Muladhara chakra, and this is why Mars is exalted there. The power and the discipline of Mars to bust through the Kundalini is shown. And so from May 2nd until middle of November, or until early November, Mars is going to be exalted, which is very powerful for a lot of spiritual awareness. But you want to understand that the Shiva Shakti energy, especially as it runs along the galactic plane, is this wild transformation and destruction and death and potential for sort of catastrophic things. I will just be very literal. I worry about, military, some some renewed military incursions, especially as we get closer to April and into April, and Mars and Saturn get much closer. And then this powerful exalted Mars is also there to, potentially, transform and destroy a lot of things. I want to talk about a couple other quick predictions. Here's another link, and I want to do it just because it's so obvious, and it's a very good case study. I just put up another link, and this was to a case study that I did when I was in India. It was before the eclipses, and it was about a month and a half ago, and it was about Trump and how these eclipses were going to really affect his marriages, his relationships, how we were going to see a real, a real potential acceleration in like the investigations around him. And since then, it's been just devastating. And again, you have to, especially if you don't live in the US, or if you have a lot of the kind of hypnosis where no matter what he does, you think it's great, then that's fine. Then you're not going to like me talking about this. But at the time that this happened, the whole like Stormy Daniels thing, it had sort of started, but there was no evidence that it was going to gain a lot of steam. We didn't really know. It could just be one more thing that we stopped paying attention to because of the total deluge of craziness around him. Is so much we can't keep up. But I said at the time, no, this is going to be not just that, but that he might be done in by a sex scandal. And again, there's no reason to really think that at the time, except I'm looking at his chart and there's an eclipse right on his Venus and Saturn in the 12th house. Saturn is his 7th lord. Venus is the indicator of relationships. And the eclipse is hitting right on that. So when I made the video, it had just started, and his wife Melania wasn't going to accompany him to a trip, and there was little things going on. But again, it could just kind of blow over. No, I knew it wasn't going to blow over. And since then, and I said it's going to be devastating to his relationships, and also his enemies are going to get really powerful. And we've seen all of this. And so again, and it does nothing but continue to spiral. And it wasn't just this thing with the Stormy Daniels, but I said the women in his life, he's going to be getting the karma of how he treats women, deals with women. That means all the women, not just his spouses and wives, that's part of it, but the others. So look at every woman in his life since then. There's no question that his relationship with his wife, if it's not damn near done on some kind of loving personal trust level, maybe it was never there, who knows, but now it gets to the point of just utter humiliation for her. So with his wife Melania, who can imagine what that must be like now? I'm sure he's not getting much support, so to speak. But also look at his daughter. Ivanka Trump has been knocked down about 10 pegs. Her and her husband, all this stuff around security clearances and trying to get her out of the government, trying to get the chief of staff to get him out, and all this stuff where she's been really knocked down many pegs. His personal assistant, Hope Hicks, the Trump whisperer, is gone. She resigned. This thing with the Stormy Daniels, he's in some serious legal trouble. This is going to be, when I said maybe he'll be done in by a sex scandal, it was prophetic, because what they're doing now, if you somehow believe the story that his personal attorney took out a second mortgage on his house to pay off an adult film star because Trump was innocent and Trump knew nothing about it, again, probably in violation of federal election laws and everything. I mean, again, if you've looked at this story, it is just full. It's nothing but a legal trap everywhere. Who knows? I think this woman she could have all kinds of she obviously has some incriminating evidence, because she's dying to break that non-disclosure agreement and give back the money and everything else, because she's got stuff that's much worse. It's been reported that she has like a blue dress. She probably has text messages. She probably has phone messages. She might have had an abortion. It could be anything. She's an adult film star. She's used to recording people. She might have tapes. God help us. But who knows what's going on? But she's just dying to get out of that non-disclosure agreement so she can show the world the proof she has. And notice something, Trump ain't saying a word about it. Every other person who's accused him, he's all over them. Not saying a word about her because he knows what she has, and he's trying to like go, oh. So this thing is just ready to explode. It could happen at any moment. And in fact, we're getting ready for a new moon cycle. This Pisces new moon, again, this is scary stuff when you consider Trump as a Leo, and we're about to have the new moon in his 8th house of Pisces. And 8th house cycles are they could be totally destructive, especially if you're dishonest and you got a lot of stuff to hide. 8th house is where secrets get exposed and blown up. And again, this is not funny. This is scary stuff because, again, unless you're not really paying attention, who in their right mind has not at least considered the fact that maybe Trump accepted this potential summit with Kim Jong-un in order to distract from a sex scandal? This is Russian roulette with the world. And who could say for sure they don't know that's what happened? I mean, come on. It was nothing but scandal, scandal, scandal. People resigning. I didn't even mention a thing about Rob Porter and the wife beating, and just this nothing but a swirl of scandal since the eclipse cycle. And now all of a sudden, again, Trump has found his groove. He's now meeting with Kim Jong-un. He's now doing this. He's now doing that. He's trying to distract, which is what he does. But he's trying to distract. This is why it was always dangerous to put him in power, because he doesn't understand this high stakes. This is not a reality show. He's trying to negotiate with a nuclear state and it fails, and because you're trying to distract us from something. So again, the point is, what happens when whatever is about to come out actually comes out? What's the next level of distraction that's possible? See, this is always the danger. And this was always the danger I said from the beginning. Look, it's not that he says crazy stuff and all like that. If he said crazy stuff and at least understood what was going on, but you get the feeling he doesn't even understand that. There's a reason no other president ever took a meeting. He's like, I'm the first. Yeah, you're the first because everyone else understood why you don't do that. So again, this Pisces cycle that's coming up with him, it's very dangerous. So there's quite a dangerous time for the world right now. Got to say it. Saturn, Mars getting really close in Sagittarius. This Pisces cycle, particularly with the president, who is the most powerful man in the world and erratic already, and now he's going to get eclipsed in his 8th house. Not eclipsed, but there'll be a full moon in his 8th house. Or I'm sorry, a new moon, excuse me. New moon in his 8th house, which again, the new moon cycles, these are the cycles that we're going through. By the way, he just had the cycle in his 7th house, and look at what it's done to his relationships. You can just see it the last month. It's been all about his relationships with women and stuff and other people. Again, not just women, but all the people around us, which include your cabinet, the other people in your life, everyone in his life. You see the relationships blowing up for the last month because we had the new moon in Aquarius, which is his 7th house. It doesn't just mean his spouse. It means his cabinet, all the intimate people around him who he has some kind of agreement worked out with. That's literally what the 7th house is. It's not just romantic relationships. So the 8th house is what destroys relationships and transforms them. Again, all of our relationships transform and destroy us in the 8th house. That's why relationships are so transformative, because they destroy us. They have to. That's what they're for. But we don't see the destruction in the 7th house. In the 7th house, we're engaged with them. We're dealing with them. That's what 7th house is. Here we are engaged. 8th house is, here is the total destruction of my identity that I had no idea was really going on. Because this is where partners can cheat on us, or even just where we understand how horrible we are, where we have this shocking reality that totally destroys and kills part of our ego. So he's about to have that. Guarantee you, he's going to have it. What's going to happen when Donald Trump goes through a huge ego death, and what does that mean to him? especially when you've had a team of federal investigators looking around in your life and you obviously want them to stop. You're obviously trying to protect something that you're afraid they're going to find out. What does that mean? Well, it means that secrets are exposed. Now, there are people who will say, well, actually, Trump is a change agent, and it's actually going to show the secrets of the CIA and how they're the ones that are corrupt, and the deep state is corrupt and all. That's not what this shows. You might think that, but this is Trump's chart, okay? This is him getting transformed. Maybe it shows him getting destroyed and then showing this big conspiracy against him. If that's what you think, you could possibly interpret it that way. But 8th house is where we get transformed and where we get destroyed. So this happening with the Mars-Saturn going through his 5th, this Mars-Saturn, especially what we already see him doing, dangerous stuff. And so again, I predicted this before the eclipse and literally the thing I said, this eclipse cycle will be devastating for him. And it has been. That eclipse cycle going through his 12th house has been just really devastating. So if people have a couple questions you can ask me right now, I'm gonna take a little breath here. I wanted to just talk about a few of those things. I have a couple other things to talk about. I'm not going to be talking about in your chart, so don't even bother. If you want to talk about something astrological or something that I've discussed here, you can ask a question. I'm drinking my green juice. So someone said, if planets are in Mula or Ardra, they will have challenging times. Yeah, planets in Ardra and Mula are getting the aspect of Saturn and Mars. By the way, I have a whole bunch of planets in Gemini opposite all this. So if you have planets in Gemini, they're getting aspected. They're also getting aspected by Jupiter, by the way, who's in Libra. But I have Mercury, Venus, Sun, Ascendant, and Rahu in Gemini. So when people start crying about their problems, I say, save it. Mars is like opposite my Ascendant, Mercury and Venus right now, very early Gemini. That's where I have them. And Saturn is getting almost exactly opposite my Sun, which is in Ardra. So yeah, and again, you put challenging times. Challenges, yeah, but challenges are a challenge. It doesn't mean it's bad. Don't go, you want to always remember this, please. Don't make things good or bad. You're here, you incarnated to face challenges, not to just be happy and comfortable. And if you're just being happy and comfortable, you're wasting your life. I didn't say if you are happy and comfortable. I said if you're just trying to be happy and comfortable, you're wasting your life. And yes, I will say it just like that, because that's not why you're here. It's part of life, because God made it beautiful for us to enjoy as well. Enjoyment is a beautiful thing, and it's a very good, reflection, a very good mirror for us to see when we're really flowing with something. It's enjoyable as encouragement. But you know what else is enjoyable? Facing a challenge. That's also enjoyable. It's enjoyable to the Mars part of you. So again, the thing you want to understand is to understand the difference between happiness and pleasure and comfort. This is the death of spirituality, when we just try to chase that. But I got to be happy all the time, but I got to be comfortable. I don't want to. No, challenges are why you're here. Again, this is why I said earlier, Mars and Saturn are often the only times we grow, because most of the time we're just trying to be comfortable and chase, happiness in the moment. And Mars says, no, there's a challenge, face it. And then it feels good to meet the challenge. It feels good to stay focused and determined and meet your goals. All the great things in your life that you've ever accomplished are because you overcame many, many challenges. And if you don't overcome any challenges, then there's nothing rewarding about it. This is why spoiled rich people are often very shallow and don't appreciate anything. If I just give you all this money, you might say, "Oh, I wish I had that." Okay, you wish you had it until then you had nothing to work for. There was no challenge, there's no appreciation. And in fact, what winds up happening, because I know I've done a lot of astrology readings, what happens when you just give something that they don't earn, it winds up making them feel guilty because they've not earned it, because they're taking something from life that they haven't earned. And on a soul level, it's painful. We feel guilty, literally, when we haven't earned something and we just give it to you. This is why we're here. This is why when people say, why doesn't God just make us all enlightened? If God is almighty, then why does he just make us all enlightened? Why does he make us suffer? First of all, he doesn't make us suffer. He gives us challenges so that we'll work and appreciate, so that the soul learns and evolves and grows. Because that's what we're here to do. If God just gave you enlightenment, you wouldn't know what to do with it. It's like rich people. Like you see lazy rich people who don't appreciate anything. They don't have any, it's like they haven't had to work for anything. And again, so challenges are fine. You're here to face challenges, and the great things in your life you've have been great because you overcame challenges, right? So those things are really powerful right now. And again, they're powerful for all of us collectively because Mars and Saturn coming together are aligning us with facing challenges. Like I said at the beginning, we have no choice. We're going to be facing challenges now, and this this quality of facing challenges collectively should be aligned toward what inspires us, because they're in Sagittarius. When we lose hope and when we lose focus of what the bigger picture is, this is when Mars, Saturn, highest sense is about what inspires us, what gives us hope. But sometimes the things that give us hope are just rigid, religious, dogmatic structures, not authentically spiritual, not things that have to do with wisdom, but instead things that have to do with just blind faith and belief. And so just looking at a couple questions here. I don't feel like going through every planet in every, whether it gives its results at the beginning. Sorry, I just don't want to do that. At the moment, someone asked if I would do that. Guru Prasad Nayak. Dave, I don't really feel like talking about my personal challenges. They're in my 7th house, but they have to do with health and stuff like that always. I'll just say it's not that I'm not that interesting. But I will say the personal challenges are challenges. They're challenges like, and they've been making me stronger. So I'll talk about it a second. The main challenge is being more disciplined in like health and stuff, because I'm getting a little older, and making sure to like be working out and all like this. And it's energizing, but it's also making me, it's less comfortable. See, because what happens with Mars and Saturn is they make us uncomfortable, and then they give us the power to face the discomfort. Saturn makes us uncomfortable because we're aware of our mistakes, we're aware of the past, we're aware of the fear that we have. We become aware of it, but then it gives us the power to face it. Mars makes us aware that we're not strong, that we don't have courage, that we're not physically strong, and that we're projecting our weakness and looking to battle other people rather than battle ourselves. So with Mars aspecting those planets in my 1st house, which has to do with health and other things, it's showing where I'm physically weak. I'm not weak, but I'm, weaker than I like to be, weaker than I was when I was 35. And so what does that do? Make me weaker or give me energy to get stronger? Gives me energy to get stronger, but then you have to do it. Again, the energy to get stronger or facing our fear, that's just a statement. That's just an idea. It has to turn into an action. And the action is get your ass out of the chair and go work out. And Mars gives you the power to do it because Mars gives us the power to be uncomfortable. Again, you want to understand it doesn't just make you uncomfortable, it gives you the power to endure the discomfort, to get stronger. It doesn't just make you feel fearful, it gives you the power to push through the fear, to persevere through the fear. Fear is just an emotion. Again, because we're so emotional, we get hooked into the emotion of something and don't take the action. The action of Saturn is to be still, silent, persevere, and not give up. That's the action. Don't give up. I don't care how hard it is. I'm not giving up. Mars, the emotion of Mars is I'm frustrated and irritated and I want to blame you and I want to do. Instead, what you need to do is take all that energy and channel it towards something that's often physically uncomfortable for you. Again, with Saturn, the only thing to really do eventually is just sit still and meditate. It's the hardest thing to do. You want to know what to do? Sit still and shut up. That's what we're supposed to do. And don't move. Try it. The hardest thing in the world. You want to know what to do? It's so complicated. What do I do? What do I do? Simple. For everybody watching this, from now to the end of your life, I'm going to tell you what to do. Now let's see if you can do it. Sit still and shut up. Close your eyes. Try that for about an hour, once in a while. Try it for 5 minutes and see what happens. Especially, it's the hardest thing in the world because we want to do anything but that. But the power to do that is Saturn. And the reason we can't do it is because Saturn's fear, when we do that, we're afraid, our mind is jumping around, we have all this stuff. It's the hardest thing in the world to do, is to be quiet, be still, and sit there. The power to do that comes from Saturn. And the power to, and the courage to like persevere through physical pain and discomfort literally comes from Mars, because Mars, Mars is where we like the challenge to make us physically strong. That's where we like the challenge of doing that. So I'm going to wrap it up here in a minute, but so yeah, the upcoming, so the upcoming Pisces cycle for all of us, it starts, let me see, where do we got it here? Today's the 13th Tithi, so it starts, where are we at? Yeah, so it starts on the 17th. Well, it's the exact new moon is the 17th. And so again, for Pisces people, for all of us, this Pisces cycle is going to be a time to connect with that sort of mystical, metaphysical self that is beyond this world. You want to understand something, and it's what I've been doing my whole life, actually, especially since I started with Vedic astrology. I described the cycle in Trump's life where that first lunar in his 8th house. These are the things, I shake my finger at, these are the cycles that we all should be paying attention to, and people never pay attention to it. Never. People hardly ever look at this. Instead, it's like my chart, I have this, my chart, this. I don't care what's in your chart. Most of the time, what you're dealing with. And of course, within the context of dashas and all that, very important. But for the most part, what you're dealing with in your life, at least every month to every 2 weeks, which other than that, things get kind of unmanageable. But every 2 weeks to every month, when we have a new moon and a full moon, we're dealing with the signs, the houses of those lunation cycles. Like I just told you with Trump, lunar eclipse, where the sun was in his 6th, the moon was in his 12th. Then we have the next solar eclipse, and it starts the 7th house cycle with all his relationships. Now it's going into 8th house, new moon. It's the new moon where sun and moon come together. These are the cycles, the monthly cycles that we're all living. Now, of course, it's based on the sign that we're all going to be dealing with the Pisces cycle, which is a time to connect with more metaphysical, mystical things. But for each ascendant, it's going to be very different. For me as Gemini, it's my 10th house. As I say, for Trump, he's Leo, it's his 8th house. So I'm about to be dealing with the big 10th house cycle of this year, which has to do with work, career, status, recognition. Here you see me, like right before that eclipse, I'm doing this public thing. I'm not that eclipse, but that new moon cycle. If you're Capricorn, it's 3rd house, and you've just come from the 2nd house. If you're Scorpio, it's 5th house cycle of 1 month, and you're just dealing with the 4th house. So these things are really the rhythms of our life. This is why I've been doing daily forecast and sun and moon monthly forecast for members for literally 12 years. I started in 2006. And I have a member site where you can try it if you want. I'll put a link because people ask me. I just put it there. But if you wanted to try it, you can for 14 days for only 50 cents. And then if you want to keep doing it, you can. But aside from that, I'm just saying that these cycles and this daily understanding of what nakshatra the moon is in, what rashi the moon is in, what aspects are on the moon, what overall cycle we're involved in. The fact that everyone's about to go into the Pisces cycle, but that's going to be different for each sign. These are the main things you're going to be dealing with for the next month or so. You're seeing around you collectively in the world the things that I was just describing. This Mars, Saturn. We've seen the changes in the world that show that this is the sort of collective thing that we're all dealing with. Your dashas are an overall kind of trajectory for months or years at a time, but day to day, and I should say, week to week, you're really dealing with the lunation cycle of that year, the full and the new moon arc. And so people should really understand this. This is the way I use astrology in my life all the time. I'm always aware whether I'm in a 7th house, 8th house, 9th house, 10th house cycle, because I know this is where my attention is going to be. That's where the sun is. And that's where the sun is relative to my ascendant. The ascendant is where you start reading the chart. So if you're a Taurus person, this is going to be an 11th house cycle, the Pisces cycle. Again, if you're Virgo, it's 7th house. So it'll be a big focus on relationships, blah, 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 blah. So this is really important. And again, I hear astrologers come on and say all the time, talk about all these complex things, which are true. It's not like any of it's not true, and then students come and they get on things like this and they just, can you talk about this? I have this and this in my chart. Sure, those things are there. They're bubbling around. They're sort of facets of the diamond. They're parts of your nature and consciousness. But I'm going to tell you the most important things that you're living day to day, week to week, month to month are these lunation cycles. That's why the whole system basically revolves around that first. Very important, especially if you know how to interpret it. If you don't really know how to interpret it very well, then not so much. But those things in coordination with dashas and whatnot are really important. So if people wanted to check it out, you can do it. If not, you don't have to. But if you did want to try that, only 50 cents, you also get like 8 hours of courses and all kinds of stuff. So I like to involve people, and it's impossible to understand anything with astrology if you're not watching the sky day to day. People that just obsess over their chart or listen to astrologers on YouTube and Facebook say stuff, you're not going to learn much. Honestly, you're going to learn something, but nothing really happens until you start looking in the sky and start watching what's going on, and you stop looking at your chart all the time, acting like it's all about your chart. It's just studying astrology for the joy and love of astrology is really the royal path. No great astrologers are great astrologers because they were focused on themselves and their own chart. It's just not that interesting. Because if you're doing that, then it's just another kind of vanity exercise. When you really, what astrology is about the cosmos and your nature as a cosmic being. Your nature as a cosmic being, not your nature as an ego. So again, we tend to take something like this beautiful cosmic science and filter it through our ego. And of course, we're all interested in ourselves. I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just saying, if you really want to learn, the easiest way to start learning is watching the sky, literally. Watching the sky, understanding what cycle is happening in your life at any given time. If you understand your ascendant, then you should know that you're in a cycle right now that's finishing, that has to do with whatever sign, or I'm sorry, whatever house Aquarius is. That's been the big theme for the last month or so. And just feel how that works. That's how you really understand houses. That's how you really understand signs, is that the sun is in Aquarius. Like, I hear people have been struggling so much with like the potential, like what zodiac is it and all this, even though there's zero evidence, tradition, or anything for tropical zodiac in Vedic astrology. There's just none of it there. It's like, don't you ever pay attention to the sky and how it feels and what's going on and when planets move into sidereal signs and all? This is the way to do it. This is how you get it. So it becomes very clear at that point, particularly with Vedic astrology and the nakshatras and all of that. So I really invite people to do that, to really start watching the sky. And if you want some help in that, and if you really want help in that, you want to, and if you want to try the thing that I've put together, I mean, you know, there's like hundreds of members who try that for 50 cents and get the daily forecast, get the monthly new moon and full moon forecast so they can stay up with those things. People stay members. I had people that have been members for 10 years, ever since I started doing it. So again, this is how I use it. People ask me all the time, and they ask me this, and then I give them this solution, and they don't follow it, but they're like, what can we do? What's the one thing we can do to learn astrology and understand what's happening and stay up with it all the time? And I give them this, and they don't do it. And I'm like, well, there it is. That's what I do. Check it out. Stay up to date every day with what's happening. And so the students of mine, I will also say, the students of mine that actually have joined the member site and who stay up with it, they make enormous progress because they're connected with it all the time. So check that out if you want. I'll take a few more questions. And so it says, what's the monthly fee? Visit the website. If you want to stay a member after the 50 cents, it's 50 cents for 14 days. And then it's only $39. But that includes daily forecasts and then also in-depth monthly, twice monthly on the new moons and the full moons. And again, it's a subscription, like any subscription. You cancel whenever you want, but you try it for 50 cents for 14 days. Can't be much better than that. And then $39 is barely $1 a day. So you should click the link and see that. Yes, a lot of Geminis here, huh? And let's see. All right, so, oh yeah, the other thing I talked about, one second. I also did prediction about the cryptocurrency, about the cryptocurrencies and stuff. And you know, I looked at the Bitcoin, especially back when it was right when we were entering the eclipse cycle, because these are a couple things that were up at the time. And I said at the time that I think Bitcoin is going to be very volatile and maybe eventually really sort of crash. It'll be very volatile and unpredictable. At the time, it was trading, I think, just over 11,000, and I think by a month or later, it had dropped below 7,000, and then it has been up and down close to 10,000, but around 9,000 and back and forth. So far the prediction is held pretty. I basically said, no way. All of that part of it, I don't think is going to happen anymore. At least, I mean, I don't know. It's a tricky prediction, and I've with all caveats, because these are hard things to predict. But I did it because of the chart. It's an interesting case study. You can find it in my videos. But also the dashas, because it's in Mercury dasha, and it's a planet of loss for the Cancer, because it's a Cancer rising. So I've been keeping my eye on it, and I wanted to just kind of revisit that too. It hasn't been, the other thing that I also said at the time was that we're not really going to know the answer to that for years, because this is going to be going on for a while. But I've been watching the news about things that affect it. I just saw recently, and I think it's going to really hit. It could really hit Bitcoin and all cryptocurrencies a lot harder, as Google just decided to delist all of these cryptocurrencies. If you look in the news, Google is coming down really hard against listing cryptocurrencies in its search engine, which, if you have a business or any kind of thing, once Google says no, a sort of Google slap can be a kind of death for industries or other kinds of things. So if Google is coming down against cryptocurrency speculation and all, I think because of fraudulent, possibilities, that could be a real hit. There have been other things that are somewhat positive on the cryptocurrency market in general. So we'll see how the Bitcoin prediction goes. The Trump prediction has been much stronger than I had ever thought. Like, every woman in his life has been, devastated from his point of view. He doesn't have that support. The support of his wife, his daughter, his little Hope Hicks, all of them have been like marginalized since the eclipse and since I made the prediction. And there's the rise of this Stormy woman who could completely decimate his presidency. I mean, the possibilities between that and like what happened with Bill Clinton are not even the same ballpark, for example, especially if this is an adult film star. She could have films. I mean, who knows what she has, particularly since he probably wasn't so, careful. But anyway, so that prediction has been pretty right on. There is a question that I do want to answer before we stop, and that's the one about the Jupiter. So Dave, I'm going to get you. It's a good question. You guys don't see what I see. Kind of a lot of the things are hard to sort through. So it said, what is the Jupiter retrograde? How's that going to affect the Pisces cycle? Well, of course, the planets the signs are ruled by planets. So the fact that, first of all, Jupiter's retrograde like 4 months out of the year. Okay, so it's not unusual. But I actually had meant to talk about Jupiter retrograde, so this is why I'm glad that you also mentioned it. Jupiter retrograde is where we reflect on our principles and what inspires us. And so having Jupiter retrograde, which is the quality of what's inspiring to us and reflecting on it, the sun going in Pisces, that sun cycle, is going to have that same kind of energy. So whereas otherwise, the sun going through Pisces is what, the sun invigorates an area of life. So again, we're all going to share the Pisces part. What'll be different is the house. Again, so the sun is going to be going into us Geminis. There's a lot of Geminis. Sun's going to be going into our 10th house and invigorating our 10th house, regardless of whatever else is happening. The fact that the 10th house from Gemini is Pisces already shows a quality of Gemini, which is what you should understand as a holistic, that the zodiac is a holistic mandala. Every Gemini has Pisces at the 10th house. But what can happen with the ruler retrograde is there can be a hesitating. Well, I'm not sure. This is what inspires me, so I'm going to make sure that I'm in alignment with that higher metaphysical purpose, that I'm in alignment with these actions that I want to take. Again, there's a lot of subtleties that are happening, and I'm going to be talking about some of them. I plan to do this hopefully every week. You guys like that? Like next week, maybe talk about things like, Mercury retrograde. Mercury's going to be retrograde in Pisces for a couple months, and Venus also exalted, but Venus is going to be moving by then. But there's always stuff happening. We're always, reflecting and going back and forth. So it just shows that when the ruler's retrograde, then we're reflecting on it. And as someone said, revisiting wisdom. Yes, revisiting wisdom, but that also means that we question our teachers. We revisit and we check in and see, is this teaching congruent with me? Sometimes it's not because it's a bad teaching. Sometimes it's just not congruent with us, even if it's good teaching, because we're not ready for good teaching. We find the teacher that's congruent with who we are. As someone who's a teacher, I see it a lot. Honestly, because I know how to teach on a universal level. Most of the time, by the time students study with me, they kind of know what they're getting. But sometimes even they might try it if they haven't really looked. They reflect on and they're like, I don't know, something about this teaching is just not congruent. They're looking for something else. Often, and again, this is why a good teacher has to be able to pass muster, and they should be able to answer the students' questions. And a good teacher never says, just believe what I say and don't ask me questions. Again, this is the negative quality of Jupiter. Just believe it. No, that's not a good teacher. And we know it's not. This is why the opposite of Jupiter is Mercury, that says, if you can't answer my questions, Mercury, then you're not my teacher, right? So when a teacher can't answer the questions, this is the marriage and the harmony, the rhythm of opposites, then we wind up not trusting the teacher. So here's a little trick. You can understand that when a planet goes retrograde, it winds up trying to merge with its opposite. What's its opposite? It's the planet that rules the opposite signs. The opposite of Mercury is Jupiter. They rule opposite signs. The opposite of Mars is Venus. They rule opposite signs. So when Mars is retrograde, it's not like it takes on the qualities of Venus, but it's trying to merge and reconcile the sort of contradictory extreme. Because each planet is a very strong power, but it's also an extreme. It's just doing that thing. It's just doing that. It just has that power. So when it's retrograde, we question, we reflect and go, well, what about this other thing? I don't know. Opposite of the sun is Saturn. Of course, the sun and moon never go retrograde. So when Saturn's retrograde, which is quite a lot, we question a lot of things like the vision of the sun and the feeling of the moon. So Saturn's retrograde 5 months out of the year, Jupiter about 4 months. So this Pisces cycle will have this quality of reflection and introspection. So we may hesitate a little bit, but we're hesitating so we can make sure that whatever inspires us, which is Pisces, is congruent with who we are. Again, depending on the person's Jupiter, sometimes they can say, oh no, this isn't congruent with who I am, so I need to go deeper into those teachings. If Jupiter's powerful and they're good teachings, that's what will happen. Oh, I have these great teachings, but somehow it's not in sync. It's your fault. Sometimes that's what can happen. Again, that's if Jupiter is weak and they're good teachings, that's what can happen. If Jupiter is strong and they're bad teachings, we do the same thing, but for the right reason. See, this is why it's complicated when people ask simple questions. Simple questions are never complicated. Simple questions are never simple. If I see a retrograde Jupiter and they're like, what does that mean? I'm going to blah, blah. It's like, well, I have to look. Got to look at dignity. I got to look at all kinds of stuff before I can tell whether you're going to abandon bad teachings for good, abandon good teachings because you're not ready to hear them and you want a bad teacher. It's very subtle. But it's time to reflect and look at the nature of your teachings, your teachers, how much you're just believing in things blindly, dogmatism, and those kinds of things. So, all right, folks, I'm talked out. So I hope everybody liked this, and I got to what I wanted to sort of discuss. We'll see if we'll do this, maybe every week or something. I don't know. I like to keep it somewhat spontaneous. As soon as it's a schedule, my Gemini wants to go, now I got to show up. Now it's work. So I got to keep it fun and spontaneous. Otherwise, I don't want to do it. So glad y'all enjoyed it. See, already people, when, what day? You're pressuring me. Don't pressure me. I don't know. We'll see if we can do it, let's say, on Wednesdays or something. I'll be in touch with certification courses. Folks should join my email list, okay? Y'all should be on my email list because that's when those things are announced. YouTube, I do these things sometimes just kind of spontaneously. I try to be regular, again, but it's when spirit moves me. Most of my work, I'm bringing more of my kind of outreach here because it's a great channel, especially like I said at the beginning, because I want to be getting really quality teaching in people's hands. And there's a lot of great stuff going on. So it's not a criticism of everyone, but of course, as someone who's been teaching a long time and have my own ideas, I'd like the channel to be bigger in the sense of, somewhat regular. So I'm trying to commit to, like, let's say a regular broadcast and things like that. But if you want to know things like someone said, when's your next certification course and all like that, I'll make announcements publicly, but there's a lot behind the scenes where you can be, in line for that. So, go to one of my websites. I'll put it here. And join the email list. Because that's really where you see all these kinds of things announced. Melanie Underwood, Shiva and Shakti, I talked about it when I maybe listen to the replay again. Okay, guys, have a good one.